Alright, I guess we'll talk about it. Hello folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney. And today we are going to talk about the merits of The Wind in Truth by Brandon Sanderson. But first, I think we need to be in the appropriate Sanderson attire. Much better. In this review, I'm going to group my talking points into 4 categories: scope and storytelling, characters, plot, and pacing, and themes. I'd like to point out that everything that is in this video is purely my opinion. I'm just a guy on the internet that really likes books. If you have a disagreement, please put it down in the comment. Let's talk it out. I love talking shop, especially with those that have different opinions than I do. And I'll warn you, we are getting into spoilers with this one. So this is your final warning to get out of here if you haven't read Wind in Truth by Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson's Wind in Truth is a monumental installment in the Stormlight Archive series and is the end of the first half of the series, which we'll be getting the second half of the series in, I think it's about 10 years, so we got some time to wait. At over 1,300 pages and nearly 63 hours of audio, it is an epic tale set in an expansive universe, making the scope of Wind in Truth one of its defining features, and also one of its most divisive. As the 5th book of the Stormlight Archive series and the capstone of the first half, it carries a lot of the weight of the previous books into this one. Sanderson's ability to weave intricate plots and build a world as detailed as Roshar is commendable. But here, I think that ambition overwhelms the story. Wind in Truth isn't just the conclusion of a single arc. It's part of the sprawling Cosmere, Sanderson's interconnected universe. The narrative frequently pulls back and gives Roshar's history, cosmology, and place within the greater Cosmere. This level of depth is a dream for fans of lore and world building. But for others like myself, it seems to detract from the core of the story, the emotional pull of the narrative. There are many pages devoted to the 10,000 years of Rosharan history and the mechanics of the surrounding solar system. While fascinating, a lot of this information feels disconnected from the plot and the immediate stakes of what is going on in the story itself, thereby slowing the pacing and leaving readers wondering why we're dedicating so much page time to this. Several characters, in fact, point out that the scope of the Cosmere is just too big to consider as a factor in the problems that they are trying to face. And I'd say the same is true for the reader. For me, one of the most noticeable issues with Wind in Truth was the fragmented nature of the storytelling. Sanderson often juggles multiple point of views and storylines throughout his books, but this time it feels overwhelming. Chapters jump between perspectives, some of which introduced only to be quickly abandoned without making any progress in either the subplot that character is part of or the general narrative. There were several subplots like Ja Anat's plans or the fate of the Dawn Shards that are touched on without fully being explored and leaving the readers with more questions than answers, which I'll get more into this later, adds to the feeling of this being more of a setup novel for more stories than an actual full complete novel on its own right. Some of the arcs felt that they could have just been removed or condensed to make a tighter story, without impacting the overarching narrative. All of this results in a book that, to me, feels like a collection of novellas, a group of adventures that take place at the same time, but only loosely relate to one another. While I do think this does reflect more real-world experiences for how events happen, I think it leaves the reader untethered from the narrative in the story itself, struggling to discern the true focus of the book. Brandon Sanderson's commitment to world building is both a strength and a weakness in The Wind in Truth. The depth and detail in Roshar's history, cultures, and magic system are awe-inspiring, but they can also detract from the immediacy of the story. At times, the book prioritizes exposition over narrative momentum, and while these moments provide context for long-term fans of the series, they also feel like detours to what could have been a very tightly woven story. This indulgence in world building, while vast and impressive, risks alienating those who are less interested in the minutiae of the Cosmere. Despite these challenges, Wind in Truth still succeeds in delivering breathtaking emotional and narrative payoffs. Sanderson's ability to craft these cinematic set pieces and emotional resonant scenes shines through, especially in the climax. These moments remind readers why they got into the Cosmere, why they got into the Stormlight Archives, even if the journey getting there is a little rough. Now on to characters. Character work in the Stormlight Archives has been a hallmark of its strength, and Sanderson's ability to create relatable, emotionally resonant characters remains strong in The Wind and Truth. However, the book's approach to characterization falters in some areas, leaving a mixed feeling. Sanderson does continue to show a strength as he delves into the mental health challenges, the personal growth, and the moral dilemmas faced by his characters. This vulnerability makes them deeply relatable in a fantastical setting. Characters like Kaladin, Adolin, Shallan, Dalinar, they each wrestle with their own personal demons in ways that resonate with the readers, who have faced similar struggles in their real life. Some standout moments include Kaladin's iconic line calling back to earlier books when he says, "Honor is not dead, but I'll see what I can do." Or Adolin in this great moment of leadership when he calls upon the on oath to arm themselves. Or Zeth's powerful declaration of, "I am the law." These are all amazing moments. They feel earned. Everything that's led to these moments kicks off into this emotional payoff for arcs that have been building across book after book after book. However, Wind and Truth often reduces its characters to their defining struggles, such as mental health issues or identity. While these are important issues to explore, the execution feels simple and repetitive. Characters frequently think directly about their issues, leaving little room for nuance or reader interpretation. I'll get more into this in themes, but essentially every lesson a character learns is spoon-fed to the reader. The sprawling cast of Wind and Truth further complicates the character work. With so many perspectives to juggle, some characters only receive brief, superficial attention. This balance detracts from the depth of individual arcs, making some characters feel like an afterthought in a story crowded to give everyone their due. Now onto plot and pacing. The pacing for Wind and Truth follows the now familiar pattern in Sanderson's work. A slow, meandering build-up, followed by a dramatic, action-packed climax, often referred to as the Sanderlanche. While this structure has been very effective in the past, the journey to the climax in this installment was particularly difficult. The climax of Wind and Truth contains some of the most memorable moments in the Stormlight Archives. Kaladin's triumphant reuse of his iconic line, thereby bringing his story full circle back to where it begun. Adolin's calling of the unoathed arms, as I was mentioning earlier. Dalinar's sacrifice and the creation of retribution, which, while not flawless, was very compelling. And Zeth's dramatic declaration of his new purpose, which gives him a powerful sense of agency. There are many fantastic moments like this in Wind and Truth for many of the characters. The Sanderlanche is long, and it just keeps hitting with these amazing moments again and again and again. However, much of the story leading to that climax feels unfocused. The sheer number of storylines, many of which feel loosely connected at best, makes it difficult for the story to maintain narrative momentum. Several arcs, such as Ja Anat's plan in general, or the freeing of Ba Edo Mishram, are introduced but feel unresolved, underdeveloped, or just lacking in impact. I'd also mention that some of the plot twists and reveals feel kinda underwhelming, such as the reveal of Shallan's mother being Ash the Herald, feel abrupt and insufficiently foreshadowed. I might be wrong on this one. There's a chance that after I reread, I would pick up on a bunch of hints that were there that I just missed the first time. But it's going to be a while until I do that again. And right now, I didn't see it. It just felt like I got smacked in the face with something that didn't really add to the narrative. Additionally, elements of the ending, such as the time bubble around Roshar, Dalinar being pseudo-resurrected as his evil twin, the Blackthorn, which completely undercuts his sacrifice, come across as overly convenient, undermining the emotional impact of the climax that just happened. While the climax of Wind of Truth is exciting and amazing to read, the journey there was very difficult, and I know we say journey before destination, but we're supposed to enjoy the journey. The book's structure feels more like a setup novel for future installments in the Stormlight Archives and the Cosmere itself, than a satisfying conclusion to a chapter of the Stormlight Archives, which is supposed to be an epic capstone. Now onto themes. Sanderson continues to tackle important themes in Wind and Truth, including mental health, self-improvement, and identity. These messages are undeniably valuable and have potential to resonate deeply with readers like myself who find mental health, self-improvement, and just generally taking care of yourself and trying to be a better person so important. It's one of the reasons I fell in love with the series. The focus on personal growth and understanding your fellow person is a cornerstone of the series and remains strong in Wind and Truth. However, the presentation of these themes lacks all subtlety. As I mentioned before, characters frequently either speak or think directly what their problem is and the lesson that they're learning and the theme that their character is meant to embody. I understand that there's going to be some of that because the magic system itself lends itself to this, with each order of Knights Radiant having oaths and speaking them and really dedicating themselves to these ideals, which are in turn the themes of the books. But this approach feels overly didactic, as if Sanderson doesn't trust us to grasp the deeper meaning of the story without explicit guidance. Sanderson's efforts to include diverse identities and raise awareness about real-world issues is commendable. By exploring mental health and sexual orientation, he aims to foster understanding and empathy. Unfortunately, I felt the execution was performative, with many of these coming across as like a checklist item that he was just like, yep, I got one of those, and less of an integral part of the story. I think I would have felt different about this if things like this were coming up earlier. He does it very well with the mental health issues, but not so much with the sexual orientation. This has been a long series, and I felt like this is the only book where suddenly it all matters for a lot of characters. And I love the representation, but there is one instance where a character gets a single paragraph about this, and then it is never touched again. Despite these shortcomings, the themes of Wind and Truth remain powerful and inspiring. The focus on self-improvement and resilience is particularly impactful, offering lessons that readers can apply to their own lives. I can't think of how many times I've literally thought to myself, journey before destination, when I'm about to do something that really sucks. Even when the delivery feels heavy-handed, the underlying message, the theme of the story, is still strong, impactful, and meaningful. In this episode, I've talked a lot about the flaws of Wind and Truth. And yes, there are many things I did like about it. While previous installments of this series have been 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5 stars for me, I'm going to have to say that Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson was a bing, 3 out of 5 for me. Which is disappointing. I really love this series, and there's a lot of good things about Wind and Truth. But my opinion seems to differ from the general consensus of the community. And that's okay. We're not all going to like the same things. But I wanted to think about it for a bit. Why is it rated so highly? Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson right now is 4.55 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. A fantastic rating for a book. But why is it rated so highly? I think there's a few reasons. One, Wind and Truth benefits from the momentum of the Stormlight Archives, which as a series starts out very strong, especially with the first 2 books, which in my opinion are the best of the series. But it also benefits from the reputation of Brandon Sanderson just being known for his epic fantasy crafting, as well as the emotionally charged endings. Longtime fans of the series are invested in the world and the characters. So the sheer momentum of Wind and Truth is carried on the backs of the previous books, making readers more forgiving of Wind and Truth's flaws. And I also think the Sanderlanche has a big part of it. Though it takes us a while to get to these epic climaxes, the books usually end on a high note. All of Sanderson's books follow this trajectory of we're hitting up the story and yeah, interesting things are happening, but then, oh my God, so much is happening. Which when the reader is then done with the book, that's the feeling that they're left with. And that is a great feeling. These books are fantastic, but I don't think it has earned the rating that the general community has given it. All right, folks, that is going to wrap it up for today's episode of Author Adjacent. Thank you for joining me today as I kind of ranted and just gave my thoughts on Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. Definitely a book worth checking out, and please do. It is an enjoyable capstone to the first half of the Stormlight Archives. In case you forgot, I'm Michael Vadney, and I'll be dropping episodes every other Friday, though I do occasionally get a bonus episode in there just for the fun of it if I have time. Do me a favor and like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below about what your favorite Brandon Sanderson book is. For me, it's actually Warbreaker. It was one of my first introductions into fantasy romance. It was definitely a gateway to some spicier tales for me. Now remember, the road from writer to author might be long, but until then, let's be author adjacent together.